Welcome to Dayton Warcry Club. I'm Warren, and today I'm joined by my co-host Dave, coming to you from the past. We've done a ton of testing for the Nova Open, and for this episode, we will go into depth on all the testing and things we learned along the way. Let's get right into it. How you been, Dave?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Good. So for the listeners, as of the time of recording, this is about 3 days before our tournament and about 2.5 weeks before Nova. But we're recording this now to kind of capture everything that we've kind of learned. And you're probably listening to this the day after Nova. I'm trying to be a little bit sneaky with this in terms of like not tipping my hand in terms of what I'm playing and how I intend to play and stuff like that. So that's why it's going out later. But I had a whole lot of stuff to talk about here for this tournament. Thoughts about the tournament format, the strategies, the list evolution, and stuff like that. And it's going to be way too much to do after Nova because I'm going to be on vacation after that too for a little while. And definitely wanted to get it out there. So,
yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, so just a couple notes here, with a few caveats. So I've been pretty heavily invested in this for the last couple months. You can attest to it, right? We've been getting together, playing pretty much every weekend.
Yeah,
mostly these missions.
Except for when you went to Gen Con, I think we've played every weekend.
Yep. Oh, I was sick the weekend before too, but
that's right. Actually, I played the day you came back from Gen Con.
The day I came back from Gen Con, we got it in. So, yeah, taking this seriously. I don't get to a lot of the actual formal competitive tournaments at the big conventions. And this has really kind of ignited the competitive juices, like back from the Magic days and stuff like that. Like, I want to get out there and to prove that, yeah, I know what I'm talking about here. And I've been really, really dedicated to this in terms of warband selection too, and to the lengths I've gone to try to get warbands ready to go. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And some strong feelings about some stuff for the tournament as well. But yeah, again, just try to get all this out in the open up front here. The last time I did an event like this where I was really like, going in with kind of high hopes was like Gen Con 2 years ago. And that was right before the end of 1.0, the event that Fred won. And I went 2-2 there. And it was actually a really disappointing finish, to be honest. The first, I lost to Peter Mercencavage because he had 2 high quads with old sneaky stab that just eviscerated me. And I also lost the game to a really good player. But just based on the mission, his warband, the fact that he had flying in the terrain, it was pretty clear that if he knew what he was doing, there was no way I was winning the game. And that's exactly what happens. I've had strong showings at other events I've traveled to, but not at the big conventions like this. So again, just sort of letting folks know like where I'm coming at here, where I'm coming from here in terms of like how invested I am in this. So for better or for worse. So talk about the tourney format. Most of the folks that are doing Nova are familiar with the format now. It's the same thing that Nova's done. I think they started it last year and they're continuing it this year. There's 3 rounds of pool play, and then you're going to be seeded into different brackets, and you're going to do single elim essentially from there to determine the winner of those pools. It kind of is what it is by itself. I don't think it's a terrible format. It certainly has detractors online. It's okay. Talk about the good and the bad, the ugly though. So the good, I think all the missions are very good. You have a couple missions that you don't like. I'm terrible at Lightning Raid. I don't think it's a bad mission, but I just tend to be very, very bad at it or play it wrong all the time. But I think all 5 are very good missions and very skill testing missions. The bad starts to come in to the tournament format because you have these 5 very good skill testing missions, but you have things like this, some artificial separation here in the 3 rounds of pool play that are going to kind of separate folks a little bit, and you're not really going to have an accurate representation of who the best player is, even though you have these skill-based missions. And another part that I don't quite like, I don't like doing it for my tournaments. The way the scoring's laid out for tiebreakers, you're incentivized to win as big as possible. And I get it. It's a competitive tournament, and I will certainly play to the best of my ability to, maximize my chance of winning. But it feels really, really bad. Like we had a couple games where just like something went wrong, the game got out of hand, or the game was kind of tight, but we sort of knew who was going to win. But you're incentivized to keep your foot on the gas and win by as many points as possible for those tie breaks. And even from a winner's perspective, it did not feel good. And I'd be concerned over someone like a newer player or casual player like locally here coming in and just getting stomped, and someone just not letting up because, hey, I need to maximize my tiebreak points. So I don't really like that a lot either. Again, it sort of is what it is. Folks online tend to like it, but again, I think locally from a community standpoint, I would not do that either.
Yeah, I have my own issues with some of this, but yeah, we'll get into it.
And then finally, I'll call this the ugly. So we got official word here. You can sign up as teams. So you've been to tournaments before where you travel, you drive, 2 hours and you get paired versus your friend in the first round. Justin has incorporated teams for this tournament to where you can sign up with a team and you will be automatically seeded into a different pool for the first 3 rounds. And then at some point, after those 3 rounds, then everyone's kind of combined together into pools of like records. So where this becomes a problem, I believe, is you have teams, and the 3 heroes, 1 chaff folks, right? They're all great guys, no issues with any of them. But what you have is a situation where there's one of them in every pool, and you have a very possible scenario where each of them wins their pool rounds without having to play each other for the first 3 rounds artificially. And you have a situation where you have the 4 of them in the top 4 spots playing against each other. And that's a very real scenario because they actually had a very strong showing as a team at Adepticon as well. And I think it's fucking terrible. There's the one F bomb. The one F bomb I'm gonna drop. Keep this PG-13. Justin, I know, I'm probably not going to be on his Christmas card list, but I think it's really bad. I brought it to his attention. He did address the situation. He did bring it up for a vote. 70% of the folks participating in the tournament voted to keep that in. So who am I to argue with democracy? But I was upset enough about this that I was thinking about dropping out of protest, or maybe, if it turns out that that this comes to pass where there's like all 4 of them in the top 4, just like dropping out of protest or something like that. I got over it and I just said, you know what? Right, we're gonna just try even harder here to try to beat those guys. Again, friendly, but competitive nature, right?
Yeah.
And so what that means is I'm guaranteed to have one of them in my pool for the first 3 rounds. So what that did for our preparation was I focused primarily on the first 3 missions of the game. And there are actually 3 different missions anyway with different deployments: Rising Dread, Pillager's Loot, Lightning Raid, because those 3 missions are going to be key to getting into those championship rounds in the 3-0 bracket. And then after that, I think it's going to be tight enough there where you got to play tight, have the dice go your way to kind of make it. But yeah, this really changed how we prepared for this tournament because of the fact that teams are allowed, and you had this artificial barrier to even competitive balance for this tournament. So we'll see how this goes. This event's coming up in 2.5 weeks. We'll see if this comes to pass or not. We'll know, but by the time you guys are listening to it, you guys will know. But yeah, I just had to get that out there. I had strong feelings about this, and I got them out there now. I don't have to, complain on any other platforms about it. But yeah, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can see the idea on paper. It's a good one. It would be nice. Fred and I have a tendency to always play each other in like the first round It just seems to happen a lot. So it would be nice as from that perspective to be like, yeah, I'm not going to end up playing Fred or Warren for a while. But it does lead to the situation, like you mentioned, where one group is just may spike all the way through, and then all of a sudden it's three guys who all know each other playing against each other, and everybody else kind of left out. So I see both sides of it.
Yeah, and it's again, they're all four of them are very, very solid, very, very solid players too, and that's why as well. You have a chance for them to run away with it, and I feel like, or for anyone else that's not in that group, they would feel kind of like screwed over. I feel, and maybe they don't realize it yet, or maybe they just don't care. Maybe they're just happy to play 5 rounds of Warcry in a day. Who knows? But
Right.
but yeah, I had some serious issues.
Solution is, of course, to beat them. So
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And I didn't drop either because it's, again, I'm like putting my money where my mouth is, right? I'm playing it and I know, so, I can have, I'm allowed to voice an opinion. If I wasn't in the tournament, then obviously I wouldn't have a leg to stand on. So, but anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about at least the first 3 missions here. So we'll kind of talk about these just kind of at a high level here. So Rising Dread, this is a Salty Sea mission. This is your least favorite. It's okay. You don't have to say anything. I like this mission.
No, I've sort of have an issue with the pack in general, and just that we'll get into as sort of we go through it. A lot of the and I understand this is like a competitive. This is supposed to be like the competitive, high level tournament, at least in the.
It's what it's been billed as, right? I don't think the format agrees, but I think all 5 missions are very good skill testing missions.
Yeah, they're all. I would actually say some of them err on the side of being overly complicated. Yeah, but again, like they are skill testing, and once you've played them a few times, and you wrap your head around them a little more, they're pretty good. But they're definitely like, if you are like even a semi-competitive player, I don't think you're going to have a good time at this tournament. Like,
ooh, that's a good point actually. You're right. If you're just like, yep, I'm playing the GT. I play Warcry once every couple months. Yeah, you're going up versus someone who's been, we've had a few reps. How many games have we played? Probably 20.
Yeah.
Three games. Yeah, maybe say 2 or 3 games per session, 6 to 8 sessions, probably 20, 25 reps. And there's folks, again, 3 Heroes, 1 Chaff. Those guys are playing tons of reps online, and it's going to show. It's absolutely going to show. The difference between the folks that play a lot and the folks that are not is going to be very, very stark.
Yeah, it's great. I want Warcry to have that kind of community.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But I do think that if you are not like a serious player, this is, I think, like, I know we like to go to our Magic analogies. It's like going from like an FNM to like a GP. And if you're not prepared for that level, like I don't see you having a very good time at the tournament. But maybe, you never know.
Again, it's a big convention event. This is the one event that Justin runs every year. But I know from the events that I run, either just casual meetups and 2 or 3 tournaments a year, something like that. I see kind of a spectrum, right? We have a handful of very serious players that talk and tune lists and stuff like that, and we get about a good chunk of folks that are just happy to come here and bring some warbands and play. I try to set up a tournament that appeals to both of them, where everybody can have a good time.
Yeah, and the other thing, like I said, it's an event tournament. You're paying to get in, you're paying to play, so that does sort of evoke to at least some level of commitment. I mean, you're not going to go pay to play in a big tournament if you're not at least somewhat committed to the game. So
travel to Nova, everything else like that. Yeah,
right.
So the Rising Dread, basic objective control for the most part. Generally speaking, the way that we've been playing this mission, or the way that I have, typically you typically hold even on objectives. You don't want to get too far behind, and you want to have control of the center, and typically my play has tried to have been to get 2 of the 3 treasures in the middle. Usually, if I'm winning my fights and controlling the middle, I can usually get a 3 cap as well, and that's usually how most of the games have turned out for me. And we'll talk about the specific deployments in a little bit as well. And this is when things come on and how we kind of stack deployments in some of these missions as well. But again, pretty straightforward here. I know one of the things you kind of don't like about it is the fact that like the 4th round is so important, or actually because you're accumulating points as you go throughout, you actually could be mathematically out of the game by turn 4.
Right. Yeah. My criticism is there's not any real catch-up mechanic, which not every scenario needs one. But the point swings in this one can be so wild that it can be easy for one player to just dominate, and the game is over by the end of round 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the possibility of snowballing in this, which you would feel bad. Next up is Pillager's Loot. Again, this is just a slight variation on Loot and Pillage. And I think what we found on this one was, let me grip the pen out here. We typically try to fight and win in the middle here because these guys are coming on turn 1, both the hammers. And if you can actually loot on turn 1, you can actually score points. And then you also have treasure, which means that you are eligible for, there's a bonus 2 points for having most kills by a treasure carrier. There isn't listed here. So you want to be in the running for that. Typically, the daggers are going to come on turn 2, and they're going to come on within distance to actually be able to loot these objectives. So they can immediately loot and then start running away. And the shields are going to have kind of a hard time. It's not impossible, but they're going to have to chase those treasure carriers. And with a little bit of interference, you can kind of stop that. Again, not always, right? It's still a kind of win 2 out of 3 fights, but there's a little bit more to it because you want to have treasure carriers killing, and you want to be picking up treasures early to score those 1 point per turn. And then you're going to be like rumbling over, holding the treasures at the end of the game as well. So I like this twist on Loot and Pillage. I think this is a good, fairly straightforward mission.
Yeah, I like this one. One thing we've really determined is if your opponent's dagger is stronger than your shield, that's going to make a big difference in the game because they are going to start out in round 2 like basically looking at each other.
Oh yeah. Well, at that point, I think your shield is if your dagger is stronger than the shield that's coming on each side you don't even use your shield to try to threaten because you're not going to get anywhere. You're better off probably moving them straight towards the center and trying to swing that one instead. Maybe there's this one, and then the next one. There's a concept of like called a home objective, right, or these home treasures that I think these missions are set up to where like it's pretty hard. You need to try pretty hard to take someone's home objective, and it might not even be worth it. Or you need to work really, really hard to take the home treasures. And again, it might not be worth it. So I think that's interesting. And then the last one we'll probably talk about here is Lightning Raids. I think this one we have the most reps on because I keep on playing it and I keep on losing. I think I'm like 1 in X lifetime on this mission. I am that bad at it. There is a lot going on in this one. This is a Ferocious Norwood 2 mission. So Games Workshop gets the blame for this one.
I like this one.
It's hilarious.
I'm like 9-1 against you, but
maybe.
But I like this one.
Yeah. So you're taking objectives, right? Take control 1, control 2, control more. I think, and it looks like an objective control mission, but there's some other hidden secondaries here where if you steal an objective, that's a 2-point swing. And so you really can't aggressively try to go for like a 4 cap or 5 cap because if you get pushed back, then they're going to catch up. They're going to catch up really quickly. You can afford to get down a little bit as well. You could go down 3-1, or even like maybe not 3-1. You can keep it semi close, and as long as you're down by a single point, then you get the underdog bonus, which means you get to pick an objective that's worth a bonus, that's worth an additional victory point. So that essentially turns most of these 3-2 rounds for objectives into 3-3 ties again. So it allows you to keep parity as long as you're just behind by 1 victory point. And again, the concept of these home objectives here, right? So your shield comes on here, your shielders coming on in the corners here, and you need to like be booking across to really be threatening those home objectives and kind of sacrificing the middle of the board and to be able to do that. These home objectives are generally pretty safe. You can if you're behind, you can pretty easily say, "Yep, I'm picking this objective. I'm going to score my bonus point here, and I'm gonna keep parity with you pretty much on the objectives." Now, I think this is a sneaky one, and I think the one time I actually won this, I actually played this the way that it's supposed to be played. Again, been keeping my ears to the Discord, watching a lot of videos and listening to a lot of people talk and watching a lot of tournament results and trying to come up with my own strategies for these. And so I think it was Salty. He had mentioned that like this is actually a kill mission in disguise because you have a running total, 2 victory points per turn of the higher wound total taken out throughout the game. So you can get ahead on wounds taken down early on, and you can carry that, and that's going to those 2 extra victory points are actually going to be what gets you the victory in the end. And even then, when everything goes right, it seems like these were like very, very narrow games. Oftentimes I think the one that I won, I think I narrowly won by like a point or 2 at the very end or something like that. After all, we compute all the steals and everything else. So you need to play very conservative. If you have an objective, like don't let anyone snake your objectives, and play very, very cautiously in terms of like engaging. And you need to play this like a 4-round straight up kill mission where you need to preserve your material as best as you can, set up favorable fights and exchanges as best you can, and that is what is going to get you victory in this.
Yeah, definitely. The strategy I've picked up on this is I'm not really even concerned with trying to hold 5 points or 4 points even. Hold 2 very strongly, and then you can kind of maneuver around the other 3. Maybe you pick up some steals, you try to get ahead in kills. Like it looks very objective based, and it's not nearly as objective based as it looks on paper, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if you go for steals, I think you do it on turn 4 steals, obviously. Turn 3 steals, maybe. But I had to train myself. Like, do not go for steals on turn 2. Do not try to even like run a Vanguard across to take the home objective on turn 1. You get punished for that. Yeah, there's so many traps here in this mission.
You play it more conservatively than it looks like, because there's so many objectives. You're like, oh, I got to get all the objectives. Like, no, you really don't.
I need to be like, right. Because any other objective mission, right, where it's take 1, take 2, take more, like you want to be doing that. But the two catch-up mechanics just completely undo that. So again, I'm trained that I think objective missions, I think I play the best on objective missions, and I play them all very similarly. And I think that's what kind of leads me down that road to playing this one incorrectly. So hopefully I
set this up playing against you so that by round 4 I can table you almost. If obviously that doesn't always work, but that's sort of the goal. But if you can basically not necessarily table, but just decimate your opponent on round 4, like the steals and the kill points are going to come.
Yep.
Those are baked in. It's just going to happen.
Yeah. Setting up good matchups, good trades, that sort of thing. And that kind of brings us, I was going to talk about this when we talk about lists, or at least the list that we all most of the lists that I've played against that folks had here in the local area, they tend to, I'm going to talk about it then, but I'll mention it now. So the lists that we all have they're relatively tuned and deadly, right? Because we're all about spreadsheet efficiency and, Vexmore and Vanguard and relentless killers and getting the most efficiency out of our dice and our points. And it leads to very lethal games, right?
Yes.
Like everyone is bringing highly tuned, very, very deadly weapons here. someone walking up with a bespoke versus any of our tuned lists be like blown out of the water. But between your tournament list or an ogres list or something like that, they are all very deadly, and there's a very narrow margin between victory and defeat with these highly tuned and deadly warbands that we're all playing that are just pure damage, efficiency, everything else like that. You know, sometimes it comes up to bad matchups or making a bad call on an engagement, or sometimes the dice just don't come to us.
Yep. Sometimes you just whiff. You roll ones and twos.
Yeah, and it could be like one bad swing, right? One whiff or one bad swing, and it turns the tide of the game. So I have to be ready to deal with that too. So again, that's Warcry. It's a dice game. I've had a lot of those games, and they're great games, but can be heartbreaking, right? The last couple we'll talk about here just real briefly. Bloodshed. This is a kill mission. I need to have folks in the center here as well. Again, this one sort of rewards having a horde or having more models. Again, I think we just play this one. I've played this one a few times. I've done fairly well on it. Again, dancing around the 5-inch circle in the middle with the weaker models, picking good fights, and my usual strategy tends to work pretty well on Bloodshed. You have any thoughts about this one?
Not really. It's fine. I mean, it is what it is. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's like the go-to teaching mission now, because I'm going to start using this instead of Reaper for teaching. It just adds a little bit extra angle to Reaper, movement and positioning again for teaching new players. I think it's not too complicated for that. And this is going to be round 4 of our tournament coming up this weekend as well. So hope you're ready for it.
Oh yeah.
And then the last one, again, if everything else goes well and amazingly I make it into the 3-0 bracket and win in the semis for Bloodshed. I've played this mission once, Hit and Run. This is a Mike Sansom special. There's a lot of moving parts for this one as well. So I played it once. I kind of understand what's going on with it. You have one active objective that's kind of rotating around. I think you can sort of predict. You can kind of set up the active objective and kind of set yourself up to kind of take 3 out of the 4, like probably 1 of the 4 turns, you're probably not going to be in position to even like take it. But I think you can be in a position to win 3 out of the 4 on objectives. And then there's also a Reaper mechanism here too. You're looking at a blood tally for each turn as well. And 1 point for wounds remaining in the middle of the board, which could possibly swing it as well. That's only 1 victory point, so I'm not super concerned about that. But I think the one time we played it, it helped keep you in the game because I think you had a natural advantage on wounds remaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're playing ogres at the time, so
yeah, there was a tyrant in the middle, so
yeah. So I was forced to kind of like just ignore the wounds remaining, just assume you're going to do that. Focus more on the objectives, getting some good matchups, and getting good matchups against your ogres, taking out chaff and that sort of thing, and removing options. And so that was. Again, I think this sort of reward. There's multiple things going on, but this sort of rewards again the traditional way that I play Warcry, in terms of just efficient war bands and setting up good fights and good exchanges and stuff like that. If you do that, then everything else should kind of fall into place.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, good set of missions here. It'd be nice to kind of move on and do some new missions after this. I think we'll be kind of tired of all these. If I've never played Lightning Raid again after Nova, probably be too soon. So we talked a little about lists. We talked about how we tend to like play lists around here. Again, highly tuned, damage efficient lists. This is a really great video from Salty that just dropped a few days ago. And he talks about competitive archetypes. And so besides that, so again, a few things that could potentially go wrong. We talked about just trying to set up my own expectations for the event, right? Sometimes the dice might not cooperate. That could always happen. Very solid players. I'm guaranteed to be matched up versus a very solid player in the first 3 rounds. And there's also a handful of archetypes out there that he kind of talked about that we don't necessarily have players that play them. And so again, I have general game plans for them, but I have not necessarily tested specifically against them. And so he talks about the Slam Star Master Machine Gun list. You have some dwarf shells that are very strong. You have Wildercore Hunters, right? Crossbow spam. You can roll a lot of dice that way. You have the Royal Beast Slayers Horde list, 11 models. Kyle Knapp's list with he has the headsman ally as well. But that's a very strong list that's able to cheat on activations and just overwhelm you. Has direct damage, res ability, utility. Very strong list as well. If I had to guess, I would say Kyle is probably playing that, but who knows? But yeah, some incredibly strong archetypes that come from different angles that I have necessarily tested against. So, but this was great here. But we'll talk about some of the lists that I was also evaluating, where they started, and kind of how they evolved through the different FAQs and things that we learned along the way. So first off is Iron Jaws. I had this Iron Jaws list built for quite a while. Once I got Iron Jaws built, double Brugit, double Gorchoppa. I had a Brute Boss, 4 Ardboys, a total of 9 models, which was really great. Once I stopped playing pure Iron Jaws and put the 2 Brugits in and stopped messing around and just mindlessly charging and setting up counter charges and stuff like that, this list started really performing. It got hit by the nerfs, though. And like a couple of the lists that I was playing at the time, they got hit by nerfs, but I felt like they were able to absorb the nerfs. We were able to make swaps to the list or cut models and replace them, and arguably made the list better overall. So the Brugit went up in price. What we did was we actually continued to pay for the Brugits, the increased price in the Brugits, cut an Ardboy, and the Brute Boss went up in price too, but we just upgraded him to a Mega Boss. So we wound up losing a model, but had an even bigger Titan in the middle that can hold his own. So you still have Brugit, Brute combos. You have the Mega Boss, which wins games all by himself. When you manage to score a quad in the middle, it's very, very impactful. And Ardboys, just shield Ardboys, are just very good at just running around and not dying. Brugits weren't bad either. 12 wounds, movement 4, pretty fast. They can harass things. They would draw fire. People would try to kill Brugits just because they didn't want to get Brugited. I think this list was good, and I think it's still pretty good. But the missions tended to really reward getting onto points and getting into fights and picking those fights. And I was actually stymied quite a bit by a couple different lists. We'll talk about those later. But very good finesse lists that can still deal damage. I had a hard time kind of beating those, especially what was the one? Oh yeah, Lightning Raid, of course. Lightning Raid was really tough because, again, you need to be booking it onto objectives right away, and 3-inch move made it very tricky. I was drawing up a lot of geometry for the map and stuff like that to see what I could actually do and stuff like that. And it just, again, I was playing it like it was an objective mission and not a kill mission, which was probably part of the thing that was wrong. But yeah, and also the other thing is, if I assume that I'm going to be playing versus solid players, like very skilled finesse players, Brugits were good, but you can often set up Brugit plays that could be broken up. Like, I'm going to buff a guy, I'm going to buff a Brugit, and then you're going to just run a chaff into the guy that got the buff to break up the play or something like that. Or you had to spend an activation on the Brugit, and then you had to then charge your Brute during the next activation. And having 2 activations in a row without getting it broken up, good players were able to kind of break up those plays. So Brugit was good, but it wasn't necessarily as good as it used to be. I think it felt like if you're just doing a big schmaz in the middle and your opponent was obliging you, you could do very well with it. But it wasn't necessarily where I wanted to be. I looked at Boggle Eye. I have a couple Boggle Eyes primed up as a potential different utility piece, but there was just more testing that had to be done to cut a Brugit and figure out what exactly would be going into the Iron Jaws list. What was your thoughts about this list?
Yeah, I agree. I agree mostly with what you said. I still wonder if 2 Brugits is one too many.
It probably is.
Maybe not. Yeah.
It probably is. When it was 70 points and arguably one of the most powerful things you'd be doing in Warcry, I think it was absolutely correct to have 2 Brugits at 70 points. Yeah, today maybe not, right? Maybe the right answer is a Brugit and a Boggle Eye, and then you need to test which deployment each goes in. You have 20 points left over. You can bless some Brutes, make them 3 7s. That's pretty sweet. But it required more time, and it was time we didn't necessarily have because I was, testing a very limited number of lists, and we get a lot of games in, but I wasn't able to test like full time or anything else like that.
I think with some of the issues, the final list that we have settled on is more of a just all around better list, and by that I do mean like all around.
Yeah.
Iron Jaws fight very well, but
Yep.
there are missions that you're going to face where it's just you're at a disadvantage. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Right. The lack of mobility. You have a
Yeah.
lack of mobility, but just like I can kill my way out of this. Right. That's a good plan until it doesn't work. So yeah. So we're gonna find out more though. Again, I'm gonna get more chances to play with this. We got a battle trait. Pure Iron Jaws has a very strong battle trait that's worth playing. And so I'm gonna cut the Brugits, just go nothing but Ard boys, brutes, and the mega boss. I get access to the battle trait as well. I can put +1 crit on the gore choppas, make them 3/7s. And I'm going to play this for the Friday narrative. And I haven't signed up for it yet. I'm very strongly considering playing Saturday's narrative as well. That's a lot of Warcry. That's like 3 days straight of Warcry. We'll see how I'm feeling. Just getting up early 3 days and traveling into DC to do Warcry.
I find that however you play on day one of Warcry is going to determine how much Warcry you will be willing to play.
That very well could be it. Yeah, that very well could be it. But I think this is a strong list. You could do something. Again, Salty, he mentioned this as a potential archetype as well, pure Iron Jaws. I don't know what the right list is. You may want speed. You may want a pig in there, a grunta. But you put a grunta in, and then now you're cutting. Now you got to cut something else. You could do some mix of like a grunta, a gore chopper brute, and an Ard boy boss or something like that. But you put a grunta in and having the rest of the big guys, and it gets really hard to get up to keep yourself at 8 models. And yeah, 8 models, at a minimum of 8 models was an absolute necessity for these missions. So we'll learn more about this. I also had Horns of Hashut. I had the stock pre-nerf horns list with the Fulmoroid Crusher, 5 Shatterers, 2 Flamethrowers. You could bless the alpha differently, but I think I had +1 strength on them. 9 models. I had them custom done. Really nice commission work. When the balance change hit, the Fulmoroid Crusher went up in price, and so we replaced it with a Varan Guard instead. And I think this is another change where we had enough points. We had enough points to spare where we could absorb the increased cost on the Shatterers. We could just turn the Fulmoroid Crusher into a Varan Guard. And I think this arguably made the list better because Fulmoroid Crusher was good, don't get me wrong, but in missions where it came on turn 2, oftentimes it was hoofing it to get into a fight. It did work once it got into fights, but it was not always super impactful. And you could definitely play around it. You could definitely throw chaff at it or something like that and keep it from being an impact piece. So the Varan Guard, I think, makes this list very strong. And I was doing pretty well with this list as well, up until, what was it? It was Lightning Raid, I think, that exposed this list as well. Because when we realized that Lightning Raid is a killing mission, you have one strong hammer that can kill a lot of things. The flamethrowers could potentially be played around. You also had to deal with what happens if you don't get the dice for your flamethrower. You don't get high triples. The triples whiff. You don't score crits, that sort of thing. The list was very good. You wind up having to play a lot of keep away with the Shatterers. And, it was winning a lot of games, but it wasn't getting your face playing Smash Mouth, Warcry, and winning like that. It was being very cagey. And again, I enjoyed playing it. It was a strong list, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to play that for 5 rounds in a very competitive event. And then when we realized that the killing power was very important on Lightning Raid, that was kind of like the final nail in the coffin. I did pick up a Bull Centaur to act as a Varan Guard, got him kind of rebased, and actually he's in the mail on the way back. I have a very nice Varan Guard to go with my horns in the future, but got that kind of done on short notice. I tried to paint it myself, and it was not really matching up with the commission standard or everything else. So yeah, this kind of just shows kind of the lengths I was going to in terms of like trying things out and making sure I had something like good and presentable for the table here to make this work. Thoughts on the Horns list? You played against this a few times too, right?
Yeah, and again, it's not at all that it's a bad list. It does a lot of things very well, but it does have an Achilles heel, and I think any fast, strong based warband, like, because they're so glassy, you only have one model with more than what, 15 wounds? I mean, the Vanguard.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Alpha's got 20, but
Okay.
Alpha wasn't doing a lot either. Alpha would fight a little bit. Alpha was just another utility piece. He would oftentimes be set up kind of in the middle, and he would throw smoke bombs, or he would do the smoke bomb reaction to try to, like, you're going to charge and try to kill him. Well, he's going to give you, I think it's a -1 strength. Yeah, if his smoke bomb reaction goes off, and stay alive that way. Flamethrowers oftentimes didn't do a lot of damage, but again, they were nice distractions. People were going, making beelines for them, while the Vanguard did work. It all worked, but it wasn't working decisively enough in all the missions where I needed it to.
Right.
So we talk about other lists. I would be remiss. So you obviously tons of games versus you, and just a great playtest partner. Another great playtest partner. I think I might have mentioned him before, but Josh is out of state right now, can't make our tournament, but he's a relative newcomer to the group. Very strong player. He plays a lot of very finesse lists and plays them very well. I'll share a couple of his lists. He plays Sylvaneth, the Calthea Zandire Kurnoth Hunter combo, very strong there. He runs a Shadestalker, which is the net leader. Shadestalker is a 5/4, 2/4, and so it deals some damage. It has 19 wounds with the additional wounds on it, so it's glassy, but not ridiculously so. It has all the utility of nets and teleports, and he plays it very well. So this is a pretty strong Sylvaneth list that has stymied me on a number of occasions. When I talk about certain lists not being able to get into certain fights, oftentimes it was these matches versus Josh.
Yeah, I like both these lists a lot, and he's a great guy. That
Yeah.
in the limited interactions I've had with him, he's been very good.
Yeah. It's a Slanesh Demons list too, so he ran Vexmore, ran Lassevier as well. Lassevier is super strong too. I knew that actually at playing against Lassevier, moves fast, big threat radius on a triple. You can buff the damage a little bit. He chose to use a Mindseeker Spheranx as his third big hammer, and people were all like, "Oh yeah, Fomo Crusher, Ogre and Myrmidon went up in price." Mindseeker Spheranx was arguably just as good as the two of them, and again, fast mover, access to a net, access to the quad, which can break up a big play and stuff like that. Daemonette's being pretty good. So I only play against this, I think, once or twice, but this was a very good list as well. So if you're looking for some very strong lists that can hang versus the highly tuned, damage efficient lists that we bring with the speed, and if you have the finesse to kind of dictate where the fights happen, this is another angle to take that is done fairly well in our local area. Other things we've kind of considered here. So Fred's kind of big on ogres, and we sort of knew this, right? We talk about this a lot, and I think this is sort of like you could take any sort of baseline or any sort of like 3 big ogres and some Noblars. Here's if you want to make this as simple as possible and just kind of go from there, you just take 3 crushers. They went up in price, but they're still very strong, 4/5, 4/8. They went up in price for a reason, because they're just gross. Gut Lords, same story. But if you want to keep it as simple as possible, 3 crushers, 5 Noblars. You can tweak the Noblars, put Bushwhacker in. You can tweak the ogres a little bit. But these have been strong shells as well. I think this is your current list, what you were playing. Mm-hmm. Tyrant Crusher, Glutton, Bushwhacker.
Yeah, I've already sort of announced to the group, and it'll be too late here, but you'll find out that I am kind of planning on shelving Slaves to Darkness after our upcoming tournament this Saturday. This is sort of the last hurrah for them, at least for a while. I picked up an Ogre Maul Tribe Spearhead that I'm slowly putting together, and I think I'm going to play some ogres for a while. there's a Timmy in me, especially when it comes to miniatures. I just, put the biggest model on the field and let them duke it out. So
Yeah.
ogres are real good for that.
Well, you had a great run. You've been to Slaves to Darkness. You've been the innovator of Slaves to Darkness, I think, overall on the internet, right? In terms of like the things we were the overall shell, realizing early on how good Marauders were, and they just kept on getting better and better, that sort of thing, and really shined in your hands. Always came up. Usually you come up short to other folks in the tournaments and stuff like that, but yeah, just very solid and consistent overall.
Yeah.
And better than Corn Demons. That was your first warband.
Yeah.
And then what was your second warband? Corvus Cabal.
Yeah. So both of those were so narrow that I'm like, well, I'm so tired of the narrow, like Corn's as narrow as it can get.
Yeah.
Like I'm just gonna go with the faction, the Chaos faction that has the most models to choose from, and so the Slaves, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, War Queens, Chaos Lords. You've tried a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your current list here.
Yeah, this is the current list. It is the old standard Vanguard, Vexmore, because he's gross.
Yep. Yeah, Vexmore gets a lot of press. Everyone kind of knows about Vexmore. And actually, the combination of Vanguard plus Vexmore, the two of them, one being a super damage efficient, slow piece, and one being a piece that moves very, very fast, that they both complement each other very, very well. And then I think you finally hit on the final piece of the equation to go with the Marauders, the final third big bad to go with them.
When we got the most recent fact, they took it some from us. There used to play with the Fulmeroid, and it kind of got priced up a little. So they also gave us these wonderful Therodons, and yeah, the Axe one's real good. I mean, they're all good, but this Axe one, the normal Axe fighter, that's real good as it turns out. For the point cost, you get a lot of what you want. You get better movement. You got a 2-inch reach. You've got decently strong damage attack profile, decent strength, toughness, decent amount of wounds. Like nothing's outstanding, but it's just real solid overall. And then it has a special ability. Well, all Therodons have the special ability that is potentially outrageous.
Yes.
Actually, you get to use it once per game, and I think it would be ridiculous to push it beyond that. Like, there's no way.
Oh God, it is. Yeah,
it could be an every turn type thing.
It's a hell of a drug. It's a hell of a drug.
So yeah, it's real good. It potentially allows the Therodon to kill things way above its weight class in one swing. It's happened. It's not saying it's a guarantee, but it has happened that they can punch way above their weight class.
Yep. So I did some math, assuming for a high double for Unleashed Savagery, or the big swing as I call it, you're going to get +4 attacks. And so more often than not, I think you would probably agree, you're usually rolling 7 dice on that one attack.
Yeah.
I've rolled 7 dice quite a few times.
Yeah.
That comes out to an expected value of about 22 damage, I want to say, between 21 to 22 damage.
Right. Not just because you're rolling 7 attacks, you're rolling 7 strength 8 attacks or strength 9.
You're guaranteed to be hitting on 3s with the big swing, unless you completely whiff on that roll, which sometimes happens, right? Sometimes you get a +2/+2, and you just gotta deal with it. But when he rolls hot, it is crazy. I managed to deal 28 to just knock out an ogre in one shot. That felt pretty good.
And we put the extra crit on the Therodon for that reason, just to get that extra, an extra couple points of damage eke out.
Because you're rolling that many dice, and then B, we sort of had the Vanguard be the chaff killer, and we were kind of going back and forth on where the +1 crit goes. And Vanguard having a 3/7 profile is pretty good too, but most of the time Vanguard, even if he's killing chaff, he's probably still using relentless killers. So there really isn't much of a need to to give him the +1 crit. He's usually use Relentless Killers and just have his 3/6 profile murder whatever anyway.
Right.
So giving the Therodon the crit gives him the chance, even with a 3/5, to potentially go hit crit and kill a 10 wound chaff model. So it had that benefit as well. And then the last thing I'll talk about here is you have the Therodon big swing is a high strength, hits anything on 3s. Vexmore will always hit anything on 3s. So there you have two very good can openers versus high wound models or high toughness models. I found out that the Varangard actually does not do very well versus T6, right? Two Varangards that run into each other are just going to kind of have a slap fight for most of the game, really. That's probably not where you want to be putting them. You probably don't even want to be putting a Varangard versus a T6, anything else, really. You need to be kind of directing him elsewhere. Or maybe he's just going to sit there and eat damage and gain 3 back each turn. That might be his job too. But Varangard does a lot of stuff, but there's a handful of things that he doesn't kill very well, but Vexmore and the Therodon especially handle those very well. So again, that threat package, it's just been super good. Marauders overperform every time too.
Yeah.
So I hopped on the bandwagon. So crash course, hobby update. Here's where I'm at. These guys are going to be done by the time I make it to Nova. So as of the time of recording, the Marauders are all done. I kit bashed them a while ago because I wanted cooler looking Marauders. I just put the wash on my Vexmore proxy. That's a Nightmare Hulk from Gellerpox. I got my own Therodon. The Varangard in work. He's obviously going to be the long pole in the tent. The trim isn't bad. It's the skin on the horse, really, that I'm having the hardest time getting all that little stuff in there. But he's making progress. But I'm digging it. I'll have this all done. So, again, hopping on the bandwagon. This is, again, all credit to you, Dave, on the list design and all the hard work that you did. The Nurgle theming and homage to Fred Shred. This is, I'm truly going and representing, the best of Dayton Warcry Club here with this warband. And, again, from where I'm at right now, I am everything is going to get done painted. I'm even thinking about kind of doing a painted display board and getting some stuff done for that too. That's very ambitious considering I'm running a tournament this weekend, need to pack for the trip and everything else like that. But yeah, I'm all in on this. You know me, folks that know me well know that I don't do anything half-assed, and I am all in on this.
Yeah, and it's looking good, and I think you're going to take home the gold for us. You're going to bring it back to Dayton.
Yeah, I don't want to I can't get my hopes up. I can't get my hopes up too much. I know I'm going to have a good showing. But yeah, it's going to be a tough field. It's going to be a tough field for sure. But I got to show up, have the game plan, play some tough Warcry, and hopefully don't get surprised. Oh, a little note on this also, the battle trait. This has actually come up in a few of our games as well, actually. The battle trait isn't bad. It makes those Marauders a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, who can turn down a free point of damage a turn?
Yeah. You turn your Marauder into the first Marauder that gets a crit is a 3/3/1/4. You could do a couple things like hit crit on a Noblar, kill it. It's not outstanding, but it makes points efficient chaff like the Marauders that do things that can just like harass people from very far out, and just adds just a little bit more danger to them. And a crit here and a crit there, going from 3 points up to 4 points, it's made a difference, oddly enough. So last thing we were going to talk about. So we got the list. We settled on the list, but now we had to kind of look at deployment groups. And typically speaking, for deployment groups, I tend to prefer balanced deployments. And based on the deployments, I knew I wanted to have a mobile hammer, the Varangard, or the killiness of the Mega Boss, the ability to wog or charge in the hammer, that sort of thing. I need to have mobility in the hammer and a lot of killing power there. I was thinking the Therodon, the shield, and the dagger tended to be the skimp group. If you looked at the deployments, I have them here again to kind of look at. You were kind of doing things a little bit differently. I think you had swapped. You'd put the Varangard in the dagger with one Marauder, and then had two larger deployment groups. You had the Therodon and the hammer. Therodon's actually a good candidate for the hammer because, again, he can hit hard. He moves fast as well with movement 5. Again, for an unknown set of missions where you want to balance deployments, I think this is where you want to go. However, we know the missions. And again, this is maybe a little another pet peeve over how tournaments get run. Some folks like having the missions so they can just play out the missions and kind of min-max the missions and stuff like that well ahead of time. I'm not a big fan of that, but again, I have to play it with the rules that are given. So I have access to the missions beforehand, and I'm going to do whatever I can to win. So what we've seen before in some online tournaments or online mission packs where someone installs the mission, they're going to do something crazy like just grossly stack a deployment group and lean on that group. And if there's a mission where that group doesn't come on until turn 2, the rest of the warband can kind of hold off until that. I've seen like KO lists that have an admiral and 2 eater cannons in one group, just gross lopsided deployment lists. I don't agree with that. I don't think it's good war crime, but if it helps you win, in this case, we're going to go for it. So they had an online competitive league. I was watching the results of that very, very carefully as well. And they played the first 4 missions, the same 4 missions are the first 4 here. And the winner was on War Tally was KU84. His Discord name is he goes by Grotch on Discord now, but he was running Dispossess. He's running the Dispossess list with Neve Black Talon and a Quester in the hammer. I think he had like 525 points in his hammer. It was gross. He had like a really skimpy dagger as well, and had I think his Warden King in the shield. It was something like that. And he went 4-0. And so we looked at that in the context of these deployments and be like, all right, what is this doing? What advantages is this giving him? So obviously we knew that the hammer was important. You wanted to have a strong presence in the hammer. Dagger you could afford to skimp on, but how much could we do this, right? Is this too extreme? And so we wanted to see exactly how could we stack, how much can we stack this? And so if we look at the missions here, we do something like Rising Dread is probably the one place where you might have kind of liability, but we tested this and it really wasn't that bad because your hammer comes on in turn 2. And the Varangard is the hammer, so he's going to be able to run onto the field and make an impact right away. I had at one point the Therodon and the Varangard in the hammer, plus a Marauder. It was like a 575 point hammer. And look at Pillager's loot. Like if you're lining up again on turn 1 against a Varangard and a Therodon, they're going to get to the middle of the board and they're going to take that treasure. Or if you go and try to take that treasure, move up and take it, they are going to run in and they are just going to smash you. That is very scary to line up against. So this kind of shows you what you can do with a stacked hammer. Lightning Raid, again, hammer comes on right in the middle. You can immediately threaten all 3 objectives. And I think fighting in the center and getting control of the center is the key to victory there. Bloodshed might be kind of dangerous, but again, I think the mobility in the hammer is going to help you out there. Again, Vexmore is not super slow, right? You give Vexmore a double, he can lithe and swift, and he can move 9 inches. That's not terrible either. And he's going to get in the mix, and he's going to be fighting probably turn 3 regardless. That's not the worst outcome ever. And again, hammer starts in the middle of the board, right on mission 5 as well. So I think it's a good one there. So some form of stacked hammer is where we arrived. And so again, I think Salty talked about exactly like where you wanted to have your Vexmore versus your Varangard and the Slaves to Darkness shell. He did talk about Slaves to Darkness as the shell. He didn't talk about the Therodon as the missing third big guy. But I think he was advocating for putting Vexmore in the dagger. But I think here putting him in the hammer works. And again, you have that natural combo of fast and slow, armor piercer, chaff killer. And again, I think it's about 525 points in the hammer. That's stacked enough. That's stacked enough. And then shield fairly strong. Therodon can hold his own. 2 Marauders. Marauders can hold their own. And again, the dagger is going to do things like the dagger is going to come on in Rising Dread. and you have a long edge to come on in Rising Dread, you can bring them on in such a way that they're going to stay out of trouble, right? Unless it's going to be next to impossible for an imposing shield to kind of interdict the daggers, because you can come on here or you can come on here. You can keep them out of trouble. So those two are just going to come on in turn 2, move towards the middle, cover down on the closest objective, and then work as a backup for treasure carriers that are already in the middle of the board. Pillagers loot, again, they're going to start on the board on the home objective, be able to loot and run right away. Lightning Raid is probably one of the weakest ones. But again, I think actually the daggers are going to start so far away, you're just going to like run them towards here. And I think you're just going to kind of give up on you're just going to kind of give up on trying to get this home objective. You're never going to be able to kind of crack that castle. I think even when I had like reasonably solid daggers, I was never seriously threatening that home objective. So why even try? Move them in towards the middle. This shield is going to be able to protect its home objective very easily. And again, a strong hammer is going to just control the center here. Bloodshed, again, the dagger is going to come on late. That's fine. You just kind of run them on, get them on the edge of the circle. Here, I did this once. Here, this wasn't that bad. The daggers were far enough away that it wasn't too much of a liability. And again, shield's coming on in turn 2. Therodon moves fairly quickly. He can get into a fight where he needs to. So again, I feel pretty good about that as well. So I think, the second place list from the competitive league in July also, it was like an ogres list with a tyrant in the hammer as well. So again, hammer's definitely where you want to be. And I think I was commenting on this on Discord a little bit. I feel like it's potentially an arms race, like whoever has the biggest hammer wins, without like weakening you versus anyone else. But I think it's just a strong strategy in general that it's going to pay off. So again, this is all secret tech right now. This is getting published the day after Nova, so hopefully this all works out for me. I've been involved in discussions online with folks, shared a few thoughts, but have not tipped my hand really on list evolution, that sort of thing. If you've been listening to this channel, you've been playing locally, you're aware. You've been listening to this channel, and I kind of dropped some clues about what we had, but not the explicit warband lists. So anyway, that's all I got for Nova Open. Lists, deployments, strategies, things that could go wrong. What else do you got, Dave?
Hey, all those game workshop reps that listen to us. Thricefold Discord needs its own standalone box. You'll sell a bunch. I know you're out there. I know you hear us. So
yeah, they don't tend to do that, but it would be nice. Yes. A more likely outcome is going to be Vexmore getting a points adjustment to make it not as gross. Yeah. So I know this is not. It's not. I know it's not going to last forever. Might last 6 to 9 months.
You still get Lastvir too. So
yeah. Oh yeah, Lastivir's pretty strong too. Yeah. The Bladed Whip and Vash just isn't bad either, to be honest.
So free the Thricefold Discord.
We've had a good time acquiring proxies and kit bashing them in those. So
sure. Yeah. Yeah, we all have our own unique Vexmore proxy. So that's interesting.
Well, I have an actual Vexmore in all the 3 of them, but I'm actually going to use them in a Slanesh warband and actually going to paint them Slaneshified. From a theme perspective, I wanted the Nurgle theme, and he wouldn't really fit in. Well, if that's all you got, if that's all we have, then this brings us to a close for this episode of Dayton Warcry Club. Hopefully I did well enough to make all this work pay off, and if you're seeing this, then I had a pretty good showing. If you're not seeing this, then I got smoked and I'm too cowardly to publish this. So
he's out of the club.
Yeah, hang my head in shame. But if I had a really good showing, then you can stay tuned for a full report on how things actually went. Might be here, I might have to get another channel to do it because I'll be on vacation. But regardless, after Nova, in the meantime, you can always chat with us on the official Warcry Discord. Link is in the description below. You can find me there as War Machine.
I'm there as Steve Forever.
Thanks for listening. Faradun.
I saw it. I wasn't going to say anything.
Where was I?